Lords, glorious lords. There's a whole lot of them in Warhammer 2, many of whom seem to fade into obscurity, leading to lord depression and very often a bad drug habit. Many lords end up simply getting benched on the team because nobody wants to play them, because the MVP hot right now lords are always the ones getting picked. So this video is going to be 5 underused and underappreciated lords and what they bring to the table and why you shouldn't always automatically overlook them for the quote-unquote strongest lords right now. Before we begin though, please do take a minute to watch a sponsored ad, as it does support this channel and helps me keep bringing you these videos. It's a game I do enjoy myself from time to time, Conqueror's Blade, and Season 7 has just arrived, bringing the Vikings to the mother-freaking table. Bringing you and your characters some snazzy Viking gear to Viking yourself up with, as well as 3 new units, the Sons of Fenrir, Berserkers, and Shield Maidens. Also, there's a new siege map, the Ring Fort, a new rune system to power up yourself and your units, and you also have the Battle Pass rewards to unlock, inspired by Norse mythology. If you've not seen or heard of Conqueror's Blade before, imagine playing Total War in third person. You have a powerful hero and you have a bunch of units to command in massive battles with other players. It's all about commanding your units tactically to get the most out of them, to defeat other players' units and defeat the players themselves to win the day. Between all that, there's a massive MMO world to explore with a whole bunch of other stuff to do. It is free to play as well, so nothing to lose by giving it a go. Check the link in the description if you want to find out more about Season 7 or just to check the game out itself. If you register through my link as well, you'll get a 7-day premium account, which will give you a boost to your hero's XP as well as a bunch of other starting stuff to help you on your way. Conqueror's Blade, ladies and gentlemen. Now then, our first lord is one from the old world, from the beginning of Total War Warhammer, the grandfather of necromancy, HEINRICH KEMMLER. Written off as just a squishy wizard, I think he actually has some pretty powerful use potentially. So Heinrich is one of the cheaper lords for the vampire counts. He's often overshadowed though by Manfred on his dragon, or Vlad being the super tank, or even some of these more generic non-legendary lords. So poor old Heinrich rarely gets any love, probably because he doesn't have a big swanky dragon, but what he does have is a horse, and that horse is the key here. Now he is a wizard, so his stats are pretty terrible, don't really want to use him in melee most of the time. He is a necromancer, so he comes with some good regeneration options, got the strong ability in Undeath Resurgent given melee defense and leadership, and of course, he brings local hardman Krell to the party, a strong armor-piercing anti-large hero. For his spells, all you need is the basic 2, Raise Dead and Invocation, nothing else is needed. His items though is what we're gonna need to make him good here. This 75% physical resistance, that's pretty substantial. He's not so squishy when he's got that going for him, also gives Strider and Magic. He also has the Chaos Tomb Blade, which gives a beefy 8 health per second and 5 melee attack to himself and nearby allies, when he's in melee at least. Couple that up though with the Master of the Dead Necromancer ability, and he can put out some serious regeneration to anyone nearby, which is why he can do so freaking well with Blood Knights at his side. So he'll want to travel around with the Blood Knights to support them, and they can act as a bodyguard to him as well, because he is still a little bit squishy even with his ability for 75% physical resistance. That only lasts 30 seconds. But I did a little test to see what we could do with that and how well Blood Knights could do with his support. So what I'm going to do here is send Heinrich in to some Altdorf Gryphites. I'm going to pop his physical resistance as he comes in, takes a bit of damage on the charge, but he absorbs some of that charge for the Blood Knights. Pops all his abilities, the melee defense there. We're going to put an invocation on them as well to heal them. And I'm also going to spawn up some zombies behind these Gryphites so that they can't get away and they'll have to stand fighting the Blood Knights, who are getting constantly healed from Heinrich and from that invocation. They've got the extra melee defense. They are super beefy. And what I found at the end of this is that I can keep the Blood Knights and Heinrich in full health when those Gryphites are dead. We've completely killed them off and my Blood Knights are like nothing's happened. They're completely fresh. So using Heinrich in this way, having him stick with cavalry and support the cavalry, the Blood Knights, as I say, they protect each other. He can provide lots of buffs. The extra melee defense especially is useful for those Blood Knights. The constant healing. We might not even need the Invocation of Nehek because the regeneration is already pretty strong. Going to put the zombies up here, and again you can see these Knights of the Blazing Sun absolutely destroyed, and the Blood Knights are absolutely fine. So you can really destroy Cav pretty well with this, and other large as well. Watch as we destroy Imric with only 1 unit of Blood Knights, by the way. Imagine it with 2 or 3. Heinrich's got his physical resistance going here, protecting him from Imric somewhat. He is taking a fair pounding, but he is going to get those heals from being in melee. And Imric here is taking even more of a pounding from these Blood Knights. Basically, we're letting Heinrich absorb the damage, which will save the Blood Knights a little bit, and they'll be able to do their work without taking too much damage. I've got Krell spawned up here as well, taking on the Dragon Caster, and boy is he taking her down. He's taken barely any damage so far, and he's put a lot of damage on this Dragon Lady. He is anti-large, he is armor piercing, so he can do some serious work. If I put him on HEINRICH, he'd probably be dead already. I'm getting HEINRICH out of there for now though. We do have to be wary. Once that physical resistance wears off, you do have to be careful. If you're attacking something large and dangerous like HEINRICH, you want to come in from the back or side so he can't really hit you too well. Stress, we do have to be pretty careful with HEINRICH when he doesn't have the physical resistance. We do want him in melee though if we need the regeneration, but he could go and fight something crappy to do that. He could just go and push after archers. But here we can see we've got HEINRICH pretty much defeated. 1 unit of Blood Knights, 1 HEINRICH KEMMLER equals no HEINRICH. So why not give Grandpa KEMMLER a go? With the support of his trusty Blood Knights, he can do a hell of a lot of work against cavalry, monsters, and of course you got Krell there who can do all sorts of work as well. And all this for a measly 1800. You get a caster with some good abilities to support cav, an armor-piercing anti-large hero, all the regen possibilities, and he'll save you some money so you can put more into the rest of your army. Ladies and gentlemen, HEINRICH KEMMLER. Next, to probably my favourite lord of this faction, it's another old world boy, everybody's favourite golden face, BALTHASAR GELT. Another probably overlooked squishy wizard, but he does have his advantages. First and foremost, he's somewhat unique because he's the only caster lord that the Empire have. All the others are melee or ranged. This is an advantage right off the bat because with BALTHASAR you don't need to worry about paying for an extra caster as you do with any other lord. He has his Quicksilver mount, which is probably his best option as it makes him nice and fast because yes, he is really a squishy wizard that needs to avoid melee a lot of the time. He's got some very strong spells though in the Law of Metal. Transmutation, a personal favourite of mine. Great when the enemy blobs up in the late game. This can end a game, especially if it's upgraded. Plague of Rust, another very useful spell for helping get rid of units quicker, especially if you upgrade this one for only an extra 2 magic to take off 60 of an enemy's armor. And Searing Doom, a nice bit of magic damage. But there are some other good spells. These are the ones I normally gravitate towards though. His abilities are all useful as well. Conduit, Metal Shifting, Evasion. Although Evasion is one I might take off if I'm not worried about him being chased around in the air by some kind of flying unit. His item as well is pretty essential to take, I think, to give him that extra magic regen because he is going to be all about the magic. He can't go into melee too much. We need to give him that extra magic to make the best use of his talents. So all this for 1500 gold. This means we've got a lot of money to spend on the rest of our army. So he can be a good choice if you need to bring a bigger army for whatever reason. If you are worried about him being chased around in the sky though, it might be an idea to spend that little extra money to get him a bodyguard of some kind, probably an Empire captain on a Pegasus, which of course negates the savings a little bit, but it's still probably cheaper. The thing with these kind of caster only lords is that they should be that, caster only. They need to avoid melee most of the time because they'll probably be in some kind of bad matchup. This is usually pretty easy if you bring a nice mobile mount, but maybe that feels like you're not going to do any damage with your lord because they're just a caster. So you feel like you're missing something if you don't bring a melee lord. Well, let me tell you, Final Transmutation can literally put out thousands of value in damage, all in the space of about 15 seconds. Of course, that value will vary depending on whether you upgraded the spell and the quality of the targets it's hitting. If you hit expensive stuff, you're going to get a lot of damage value out of it, making it extremely worthwhile. The other spell that can do a lot of work, even though BALTHASAR doesn't get statistically rewarded for it, is Plague of Rust. Wait until you catch a strong enemy unit in a bad situation, drop their armor down a peg or two, and watch as they get deleted. You could even send BALTHASAR in for a little attack to try and finish them off to break them, because you know, BALTHASAR is pretty squishy, but he can still take a hit or two. And that brings us to another one of BALTHASAR's most useful talents. He's great at chasing stuff off, because he's really fast and doesn't have to worry about taking damage in these situations. He can chase things off while his magic recharges, kill a Shaggoth, and then kill some trolls as well. And hey, BALTHASAR is making himself useful, even if he can't jump into the more important melee fights. There are places here and there though where he can jump in and try to rout stuff off like we just did with the Shaggoth, especially casters, as BALTHASAR doesn't have to worry about being hit hard by casters so much because like him, they don't really do a lot of damage in melee. But there's just always situations where he can be useful in that sense. Wait till a unit is wavering, fly down and finish them off. If they don't rout, you just fly away again, nice and quick. If they do rout, you can go and chase them off if you want to. You could even make a play for missile disruption from time to time, as he is really fast, so you can just stop some missiles from firing, although you have to be careful that he doesn't get shot too much, obviously. But there's plenty of work that BALTHASAR can do. Just because he doesn't do melee damage too much doesn't mean he's no good. His magic can bring a lot of damage to the table, his ability to chase things off can be very powerful, and he has one of the coolest voices in the game, in my opinion. So why not give the Supreme Patriarch a shot? He's got some powerful magic, some other handy skills as well. The Law of Metal, useful against those more heavily armoured factions, also is very cheap, so good against those factions which might bring a large army against you, so you can put more money into the rest of your army. That's my lad, BALTHASAR GELT. On to another lad of mine who is slightly more green, with a whole bunch of tricks up his tiny little sleeves. It's the Night Goblin WARBOSS. The cheapest of the Greenskins lords, but he can definitely be one of the most dangerous. Now, you may laugh at the notion that this little fella is going to be incredibly dangerous, and hey, he doesn't even cost 1,000 gold, how dangerous can he really be? We need him on his Great Cave Squig because this gives him armor piercing damage and some okay stats. He's not super tough, he's not going to be a big damage dealer in melee himself, but hey, he can do a little bit of work. He's got some speed and some mobility as well. Where he really shines though is in his abilities and items. He has Get Back Here for the leadership, a standard greenskin ability, the boss's loons for a bit of an extra damage ability, but most notably, Fermented Fungi. I'm sure many people know how dangerous this can be. It'll reduce enemy melee defense and make them go into rampage, thus making them lose control of their precious unit for 17 seconds. He also has the Tormentor Sword item, with a similar effect, which is an AoE snare. It'll pin the enemies in place so they can't move and reduce their melee attack for 9 seconds. The other item we're not too fussed about. So the power of this little fella is his pins. He can pin an enemy for 17 seconds essentially with the Fermented Fungi, and then a further 9 seconds, so 26 seconds of control altogether with the Tormentor Sword. So when he's running around the battlefield and he sees an enemy that he could put in a bad matchup, he can quickly whiz over there and start to control them. Then you can couple up with other units in your army which also have control effects, like the Nasty Skulkers and their Smoke Bomb, which reduces an enemy's speed by 72%, basically meaning they can't get away from anything, potentially keeping them in a very bad situation with a bad matchup. So couple the 21 seconds of the Smoke Bomb with the 26 seconds of control that the Night Goblin WARBOSS can bring, that is 47 seconds of control of a unit. Furthermore, you could bring in the River Troll Hag, who has Mither, which is another 72% speed reduction, for a bunch more seconds, which essentially gives you over a minute, one whole minute of control of an enemy's unit. Do this on their lord and they're pretty much yours for the taking if you've got the right units in the right places. Here we've got some Wild Riders which we just managed to catch with some Nasty Skulker Smoke Bombs, so they're stuck in melee pretty much. They could try and run away, but it's probably not worth it. We're going to get the flank on them with some Squig Hoppers, break their leadership, and we could just leave them now. There's still 20 alive in the unit, so they will rout and probably come back and still could be pretty dangerous. So we're going to hit them with the Tormentor Sword, pin them in place once they've routed, and still keep doing the damage to get rid of them permanently. This can make him a great choice against those strong units that are hard to catch, like Brood Horrors or Phoenixes. Those units can very easily get out of combat when they want to and just run off and scuttle somewhere else where there's a good matchup for them, but with this, we stop them from doing that. This High Elf Lord here trying to get away, as he just about does, we Tormentor Sword him. This allows us to finish him off, and then Eagle is back on the menu, trolls. As for using the actual WARBOSS himself, he can do some work in melee. He can take on lesser characters perhaps, squishy wizards especially. He can chase after missile units and things like that, as he is very fast and does have a bonus versus infantry. But do be wary, as he doesn't have a ton of armor or a ton of HP, so he will take damage pretty quick if you're not careful. So he's all about messing with the enemy, capturing their units when they really don't want them to be captured, allowing you to potentially eliminate some very strong units very quickly if you catch them in those bad matchups that you can keep them in, or to just stop them from running away so you can finish them off before they do run away and inevitably return. Teaming up with the other units I mentioned, Nasty Skulkers or the River Troll Hag, really can make him far more effective with his pin abilities, because you can extend that pin further with their pins as well. When one pin finishes, you start a new one. They can't get away for about a minute, potentially. So don't underestimate the power of the tiny green gobbo. Now to another little fella who is slightly green and is often overlooked, even though he's the most expensive lord on the roster. It's your boy IKIT Claw, a fella with a lot to bring to the table that often gets ignored. Now, while IKIT is technically a wizard lord, he does have some toughness. He's got 110 armor for one. Not great leadership, so we do need to be careful of that, but he's got some melee defense, he's got some damage output, armor piercing, anti-large, fire and magical damage, as well as a very strong ranged attack, although limited in ammo. But this is all on foot, where I think he can actually do some reasonable work. You can put him on the Doomflayer, but he loses his powerful ranged attack and some damage. Still has armor piercing, but not anti-large anymore. Or the Doom Wheel, where you get pretty much the same thing, but you do get a ranged attack, but it's the Doom Wheel ranged attack, so it just goes anywhere. But he does have those options. For his abilities, he's got Musk of Fear and Brass Orb, which is a decent little vortex spell, good for disrupting formations, and unlimited power as well, so he can regen that magic quite efficiently. He does have the Law of Ruin, so there's some useful spells in there, maybe Crack's Call, maybe Howling Warp Gale, Warp Lightning, some good little spells that can do some good damage to the enemy. Or Howling Warp Gale, you can potentially trap an enemy flying unit and then blast them with his ranged attack. And Warp Lightning, just a good little cheap spell to spam. He also has the Storm Demon item, which is a magic missile, can also be useful to take, just to increase his damage dealer output. So IKIT's got some tools. He sadly gets overlooked all the time for Throt at the moment, who is just the go-to lord for most people. And then there's maybe Snitch and Skrolk who often get picked, but IKIT very often gets left behind. In some matchups though, I definitely think he can have a place. Using him as a footlord though, we do have to be a bit careful because he doesn't have any great defenses himself, so bringing some kind of bodyguard, maybe an assassin, maybe the council guard, someone who can look after him just in case. Using his strong ranged attack can be a good anti-large tool, although it can be a bit fiddly and takes a while for him to actually get it off, but when he does, it can go to work. Especially as it has fire and magical damage, which can whip half health off a Banshee in one shot. So some good use against physical resistance units potentially. He can also hold his own in melee, although maybe not against top damage dealers, but with armor piercing and an anti-large bonus, he does have a variety of targets he can take on. He may want Death Frenzy cast on himself, so he can get some extra melee attack though. So he's one who can get stuck in with the melee fight a little bit, although his leadership is really the thing you need to watch. But of course, he also has all that strong magic at his disposal. Crack's Call is a pretty strong spell, can be good against those elite infantries, it's good against armor. The Brass Orb, one of his ability spells, can be great for disrupting units and just holding them back a little bit, as well as doing damage. Again, this is pretty good against armor. So IKIT can have some use against those heavier factions with these bunch of armor piercing spells, and you can get some serious value out of him if you're using them on those important powerful units like the Chosen here. You also got that Storm Demon item, which will give a magic missile, which we could use against this Shaggoth. So IKIT has some serious damage dealer potential. He's got a strong melee attack, a strong ranged attack, and strong magic. The damn Psycho Rat has it all. Did you also know IKIT can fly? Sort of. He has one of the fastest charge attacks in the game, which nearly doubles his speed. He normally has 40 speed, as you can see on the unit card, but here he is keeping up with a fleeing Archaon, who has nearly 80 speed. So basically, when he goes into his charge animation, only when he's on foot, he starts flying after the enemy, making him incredibly fast, and really damn good at chasing off enemy units for this reason. Although if he chases them to the edge of the map, it's going to be a long walk back. But yeah, fun little IKIT fact, he can fly. Also, if he dies on his Doomflayer mount, he will explode in a massive Mushroom Cloud AoE attack, which will do a lot of damage to anyone caught in the blast. Even upon death, he's got a trick up his sleeve. So, IKIT Claw, lots of tools at his disposal, but you do need to be careful with him. He can be routed quite easily with that low leadership. You could try and boost that up in various ways, but as long as he's got some units nearby to support him that he can run through if he needs to get out of trouble, he can be a real asset to the damage dealing game. He's not going to support the army very well with any fancy magic, but really damage dealing is where he's going to shine. So give the Mad Rat a go, he might just surprise you. And lastly, another fella who gets overlooked because of all the fancy legendary lords, it's the Dreadlord Sword and Crossbow, specifically. So, Dreadlord Sword and Crossbow can have a place against certain factions, I think, especially if you want to bring a different magic lorebook other than what Malekith or Morathi might offer you. He has some decent stats, he can do the work in melee, although not armor piercing in melee, but he does have an armor piercing missile attack, which fires 2 bolts at once for a potential 300 damage hit. So he can dish out some fair work with that. He does have a bunch of mount options, a horse, a cold one which will give him armor piercing melee damage and still that missile attack, but I like him on the Dark Pegasus for the reason that he can be very mobile and still have that missile attack. It can be great for sniping at characters or putting damage on any important units. He could also go on a Black Dragon and still have that missile attack, so again that's quite a unique trait for him to be able to do some damage from the air and then fly down and use his dragon for whatever. But I like him on the Dark Pegasus because I like to team him up with other units that can make use of some of his abilities. He's got Volley of Arrows, Foe Seeker, and Loose. They can all be useful, but I think Volley of Arrows is the only real essential one. It's a magic missile attack, sort of like the Arrow of Kurnus. And then for his 2 items, these can also be useful, one to give leadership and an immunity to psychology to nearby friendly allies, perhaps more useful if he's going to stay with the front line. And his other item, the Guiding Eye, gives 20% armor piercing missile damage to nearby friendly units. And this one we're going to take because this will make our already strong Dark Elf armor piercing missiles even stronger. So I like this Lord because he's unique from every other Lord. None of them have ranged attacks other than a few Scourge Runner mounts, so he can offer you something unique which can be teamed up with other missile units. And that is the exact way I think he can be very dangerous. Dreadlord Sword and Crossbow with maybe the Raven's Herald, with maybe some repeater crossbows, all very agile, all very mobile, and got that strong armor piercing missile damage. Throw in a couple of Dark Shards as well and pop his damage increasing ability and you can put away a Shredder of Lustria in all of about, well, 30 seconds. But hey, this is Dark Elf missiles, they'll do this to most things even without any buffs. But using this Lord makes some good sense because one of the Dark Elves' biggest strengths is their armor piercing missiles, so why not have that in your Lord? And as I say, team it up with the other mobile armor piercing missiles and you've got a pretty dangerous little death squad. So using 2 crossbow cavs, the Raven's Herald and the Lord, they can be a good little squad to focus fire down units with. All 4 of them attacking one unit at the same time. They delete things pretty damn quick, especially if you can drop that Lord buff as well for the extra damage. They can be pretty savage. All of the Dreadlord's other mounts can be useful as well, the Horse, the Cold One, the Dragon, because he can still make use of his strong missile attack even when he's messing around in melee. But he could just go solo on his Pegasus and act as an assassin, chasing down lords and heroes, sniping away at them from afar, not dissimilar to how you might use the Wood Elf Glade Lady. And because he has some reasonable armor and is pretty quick, you can use him to disrupt missiles, although he is lacking a shield, so you might need to be a little bit careful against certain kinds of missiles. Also being very fast on that mount, much like Balthasar we used earlier for chasing stuff off, he can do the same thing. Very quick, he can chase things off to the edge of the map and then come back pretty damn nifty. So while he does have the strong missile attack, he can do his work in melee, getting after certain kinds of units, chasing stuff off. You do have to be somewhat careful though against those more elite targets. He's not the toughest in the world, but if you have the support of those other armor-piercing missile units around you, they'll pretty much take care of whatever's chasing him anyway, so all you gotta do is stay alive, and they'll do the work for you. So that's the Dreadlord Sword and Crossbow. I do like these lords that bring something unique to the table because very often these non-legendary lords get overlooked because everyone just wants to play the legendary lords, but you don't realize that some of these non-legendary lords actually have very powerful abilities and skills that the legendary lords don't have, and they can offer a different playstyle which keeps things interesting. So next time you're hovering over Malekith, maybe give that Dreadlord Sword and Crossbow a look. Maybe, just maybe, you can find a fun and powerful use for him. So there you go. 5 lords that are somewhat underappreciated and underloved. Perhaps mostly in multiplayer, but also in campaign, some of these non-legendary lords especially might not get a look. But they've got something to offer you, goddammit, so give them a shot. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, I'll see you in the future.